God has provided unless you know you can trust that He's going to provide something good for you. He's not going to provide you with dog food. Unless for some reason you need dog food. I don't know. We won't go there. So our conclusion number one here is that God will provide for you even if we don't know what it is He's going to provide. We don't have to see the end result, and we shouldn't base the end result. We shouldn't base our current faith or trust in God on what we know He's going to do for us. We should be able to trust God so much. It doesn't matter what He's going to do. We just have to know He's doing it for us. And what was the motive we learned earlier about providing? Love. Let's look at another story here.
So who got the dog food?
Wouldn't you like to know? Flip over to the next book of the Bible. We're not going to go through every book. It's just started out that way. Let's make a marathon of this here. We're going to Exodus here. Another story where we talk about providing. Exodus 16. Genesis, Exodus 16 here. What does the word Exodus mean?
Probably commando.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. For those of you that said to exit, you've seen the sign that says exit. It comes from the same root word, exodus. But also remember the word disciple comes from the same root word as discipline. So keep that in mind too. Anyway, Exodus. We're talking about people leaving. Where are they leaving? Egypt. Slavery, right. They weren't there on vacation, right? They were not at the All Palms Resort in Egypt living up the high life, right? How soon they forget, right? Exodus 16, talking about the children of Israel, beginning in verse 1 here. The whole Israelite community set out from Elim and came to the desert of Sin, which is between Elim and Sinai. No, it's nowhere near Weezer, if that's what you're wanting to know. It was between Elim and Sinai on the 15th day of the second month after they'd come out of Egypt. So they just left slavery, right? 15th day of the second month. That's not long removed. They were in captivity. They were slaves against their will, doing labor work, all the wailing and gnashing. It was awful. Was it? So they just left Egypt. Verse 2. In the desert, the whole company grumbled against Moses and Aaron, their deliverers. The Israelites said to them, if only we died in the Lord's hand in Egypt. You know, that wonderful place. There we sat around pots of meat and we ate all the food we wanted. That doesn't sound like slavery. But you have brought us out into this desert to starve this entire assembly to death. They just left slavery, folks, and they're already complaining that they're out here in the desert and saying, you know, the food's not that great out here in the desert. Was it in captivity? Here in their memory it was. In verse 4, the Lord said to Moses, I will rain down bread from heaven for you. The people are to go out each day and gather enough for that day. In this way I will test them, just like Abraham had a test. I will test them and see whether they will follow my instructions. On the sixth day they are to prepare what they bring in, and that is twice as much as they gather on the other days. Verse 6, so Moses and Aaron said to all the Israelites, in the evening you will know it is the Lord who brought you out of Egypt. And in the morning you will see the glory of the Lord, because He has heard your grumbling against Him. This is a reward factor, right? They were complaining, bemoaning. There's other words we can use here. They weren't happy. They were grumbling. And God is going to give them what they need in spite of that. Verse 8, Moses also said, you will know it was the Lord when He gives you meat to eat in the evening and all the bread you want in the morning, because He has heard the grumbling against Him. Who are we? You are not grumbling against us, but it is against the Lord. Moses and Aaron are pointing out, you're complaining to us, but we're just acting on God's behalf. So actually you're complaining to God. Verse 10, while Aaron was speaking, the whole Israelite community, they looked toward the desert, and there was the glory of the Lord appearing in a cloud. The Lord said to Moses, I have heard the grumbling of the Israelites. Tell them, at twilight you will eat. You will eat meat, and in the morning you will be filled with bread. Then you will know that I am the Lord your God. That evening quail came and covered the camp, and in the morning there was a layer of dew around the camp. And when the dew was gone, thin flakes like frost were on the ground, and it appeared on the desert floor. When the Israelites saw it, they said to each other, "What is it?" For they did not know what it was. Moses said to them, "It is the bread the Lord has given you to eat. This is what the Lord has commanded. Each one of you is together as much as he needs. Take an omer for each person you have in your tent." So the children of Israel were thrilled to be out of Egypt and loving the luxury of the desert, right? By definition, there's two things the desert is very sparse in. One is water. What is the second? Food or vegetation of any sort. So they're complaining out in the desert they have no food. Did they deserve to get what they wanted? I've read somewhere, give not a child anything for which he cries for. So they were crying and complaining. Did they deserve to get what they were crying and complaining about? Could God easily have said, "You bunch of complainers, don't you see what I did to you? I took you out of Egypt, you're out of bondage, you're out of slavery, and now you're complaining again, just forget the lot of you." If the story had gone that way, we could all say that's justifiable by God. But God didn't do that. God gave them chicken nuggets every night, well, quail, and every morning they had frosted flakes. It's in the Bible, I just read it. They had all they could eat. They had the meat at night and the frosted flakes of manna, which means what is it? So it's biblical. When your kids look at you and say, "What is it?" It's biblical. So tell your kids, what is it? So I tell them it's manna, but then they won't like the Bible story. It's not manna. Anyway, God provided for them in spite of what they did to deserve it. What they deserved is a good thanking, right? But God provided food. What was the motive for providing? Love. John 3:16. God loves the people that go to church in Merdian, Idaho, right? For God so loved what? The world. What portion?
All the world.
All the world? God loved the whole world? And God will provide for all that He loves, which is the whole world, regardless of what we do. God providing for us is not something we get as a reward for what we've done for God. God is providing for us because He loves us. He's not providing for us because we did something to earn it. In fact, we've earned something worse. What are the wages of sin? Yeah. Which God's provided a way out of that too, we'll get to. So our second conclusion is God provides for everyone, regardless of what we do, whether we should deserve it or not. Let's look at another one here. Let's look at Mark. Switch over to the New Testament here. Mark 6. Matthew, Mark. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I'm not going to count up to 30, but 30 is where we're going to start. Mark 6:30.
I like you doing
The apostles gathered around Jesus and reported to him all that they had done and taught. Then, because so many people were coming and going, they did not even have a chance to eat. Who didn't have a chance to eat? They. Okay, that's great. Who's they? The disciples. There's groups of people here. There's a multitude of people, and there's the disciples. We know it's the disciples here because it says they, it's a pronoun, did not have a chance to eat. So he said to them, Jesus was the he, and the them was, "Come with me by yourselves to a quiet place and get some rest." So he's not talking to the multitude. He's talking to the disciples. Okay? Because he's saying, let's get away from the people, you're tired, and all this stuff. The disciples didn't have a chance to eat. That's important later. So stay tuned. Verse 32, as we continue reading. So, They, the disciples, went away by themselves in a boat to a solitary place. Isn't that silly? You go away alone to a solitary place? I think most solitary places are where you're alone. Anyway, they go by themselves to a solitary place, but many who saw them leaving recognized them and ran on foot from all the towns and got there ahead of them. When Jesus landed, he saw a large crowd. He had compassion on them because they were like sheep without a shepherd. So he began teaching them many things. And by this time it was late in the day. So the disciples came to him. This is a remote place, they said, and it is already late. Send the people away so they can go to the surrounding countryside and the villages and buy themselves something to eat. So who is talking about food again? The disciples. First, they didn't have a chance to eat. They didn't have time. They go off by themselves. The multitude follows. Jesus has compassion on these people because they're like a flock without a shepherd, sheep without a shepherd. So he's going into another mode of preaching, round 3 or 4, whatever he's up to for that day. The disciples again come to him and said, you know, Jesus, you should let these people go because they're probably hungry. Yeah, I think the disciples already mentioned that they are. But he answered, he being Jesus, you give them something to eat. I think that's what they planned on. They said to him, that would take 8 months of a man's wages, and we go and spend that much on bread to give them to eat? Jesus asked him in verse 38, how many loaves do you have? He asked. Go and see. When they found out, there were 5 and 2 fish. Then Jesus directed them to have all of the people sit down in groups in the green grass. So they sat down in groups of hundreds and fifties, taking the 5 loaves and the 2 fish, and looking up into heaven, he gave thanks and broke the loaves. Then he gave them to his disciples, who set them before the people. He also divided the 2 fish among them all. They all ate and were satisfied. Are you satisfied when you get the appetizers? No. You're satisfied when you've had plenty to eat. They were all satisfied, and the disciples picked up 12 basketfuls of broken pieces of bread and fish, and the number of the men who had eaten was 5,000. Talk about stretching a meal on a budget. How much food was present? 5 loaves and 2 fish. But the power of God multiplied that food, and it fed, we don't know how many people.